You know that feeling? When you sense a real connection starting with someone, there's that sense of possibility hanging right there. And then, almost like a reflex, you find yourself pulling back.
Oh, absolutely. That hesitation.
It's like you're standing right at the edge of this huge emotional canyon. You see something potentially amazing across the way, but this weird reluctance just washes over you.
It is strange, isn't it? That paradox, wanting closeness so much, and yet at the same time feeling this fear.
Exactly. Have you ever felt that?
Yeah.
That pull and then an immediate retreat.
I think most people have, in some form or another. And that feeling, being right there on the edge you described, it's such a fascinating place to start exploring.
Why is that? Why does the very thing we often seem to crave, intimacy, connection, why could it trigger such a powerful urge to back away?
Well, it taps into some really deep questions about how we perceive things, doesn't it? Where our attention goes, and fundamentally how our minds try to organize all the experiences we encounter.
And it feels like this push-pull is key somehow. I've heard about this idea, figure and ground, as a way to understand what we're focusing on versus everything else in the background.
Yes, precisely. It's a core concept in Gestalt thinking. It's not about getting bogged down in jargon, but seeing how that desire for closeness, that's the figure, the main focus, right?
Okay.
How that can suddenly feel completely overshadowed by something else, something in the ground, the context.
So fear kind of swamps the desire.
It can, yes. And our aim here isn't just to put a name on that fear, but to really get under the hood, like you said, and explore what might be driving it.
Okay, so let's take that moment. Just before you might say, reach out to someone new where you feel a definite spark. That act of reaching out, putting yourself out there a bit, that's the figure. That's what's front and center in your mind.
Exactly. That's the focus of your immediate awareness. But then the crucial question becomes, what is the ground? What's the backdrop against which that possibility is emerging for you?
Okay, so it's like all the unspoken stuff, the mental baggage, maybe past hurts, worries about, I don't know, being rejected or misunderstood, all those little whispers of doubt.
That's often a huge part of it. The history, the unresolved anxieties, the learned expectations, they form the context.
So the potential for something really good is right there, clear as day, the figure. But the ground is maybe filled with these shadows of past pain, and that creates this invisible barrier.
It can feel exactly like that, an invisible barrier built from past experiences. Has there ever been a specific moment for you where that feeling was so strong you just couldn't quite make the leap?
Oh, for sure. It's a really potent dynamic.
It is, and it's deeply human. You could think of it perhaps like a moth being drawn to a flame.
Okay.
In nature, light often guides the moth, helps it navigate, but an artificial light source like a candle or a lamp can actually lure it into danger, right? It disrupts its natural navigation.
Right, phototaxis, they get disoriented.
Exactly, and similarly for us, connection acts as a powerful light. It promises warmth, understanding, that feeling of truly being seen. We're naturally drawn towards it.
But just like that porch light can mess up the moth systems, the sheer intensity of emotional closeness can sometimes feel, well, overwhelming, disorienting.
Perfectly put. It can scramble our internal GPS, so to speak.
So the thing we're moving towards, the connection, starts to feel less like a safe harbor and more like potential hazard.
Precisely. That pull towards connection, the figure of wanting intimacy, can become so bright, so intense, that it clashes with the ground, all those underlying anxiety and fears. And our perception shifts. What should logically feel good starts to feel risky.
And that's our brain just trying to make sense of it all, right? Trying to create order from this flood of feeling and sensation, finding patterns.
Our minds are pattern-making machines, constantly organizing input. Think about walking through a dense forest as dusk is falling.
Okay, yeah. Bit spooky.
Right. Every snapping twig sounds louder. Every shadow seems to hold a potential threat. Your brain automatically prioritizes detecting danger in that ambiguous situation.
So it's a survival thing.
Fundamentally, yes. And intimacy can trigger a similar state of heightened awareness or even hypervigilance for some. Small things, a particular glance, a certain tone of voice, a moment of silence can become magnified. We scrutinize them for hidden meanings, potential threats.
And our brains are also really good at filling in the blanks, aren't they? Trying to complete the picture even if we don't have all the information. Which is where the past comes in again, I guess.
Absolutely. It's this tendency to complete incomplete patterns. If our past experiences with getting close to others involved pain, misunderstanding, or rejection, those experiences create a kind of mental template, a gestalt.
a pattern we expect.
Exactly. So even in a new relationship with a different person in a totally different context that might actually be safe and nurturing, our mind can unconsciously default to that old familiar fear pattern. We project the old template onto the new situation.
So we end up sort of anticipating the hurt, even if it's not actually coming.
We can. We see the present through the lens of the past. It's a powerful mechanism.
It also feels like there's a big element of control mixed in here. Or maybe the loss of control. We generally like to feel we know what's happening, right? That things are predictable.
Mm-hmm. That desire for predictability is strong.
But real closeness, real intimacy, that seems to demand letting go of some of that control. It requires vulnerability.
It does. Imagine a tightrope walker high above the ground.
Okay, intense focus.
Total concentration, precise balance is essential. Stepping into deep intimacy can feel a bit like stepping onto that tightrope. You lose the feeling of solid ground beneath your feet. You're not entirely in control of the outcome.
And that feeling of instability, of not knowing exactly what will happen, that can make the whole idea of connecting the figure feel really shaky against the ground of uncertainty and maybe fear of judgment or rejection.
Precisely. The perceived loss of control destabilizes the whole picture.
But what if? What if that resistance, that fear that pops up right when things feel like they could get close? What if it isn't just an obstacle to push through?
Go on.
What if it's actually like a signal, trying to tell us something important?
That's a really insightful way to look at it. In Gestalt terms, we often talk about unfinished business. These are unresolved emotions, past experiences, incomplete situations that linger and continue to influence how we perceive and react in the present.
Okay, so that feeling of resistance, that urge to pull back, might actually be pointing towards some of that unfinished business, some unresolved patterns inside us that are getting activated.
It very well could be. It's an invitation, perhaps, to explore those incomplete emotional patterns that are seeking some kind of resolution or integration.
So instead of just labeling it fear of intimacy and trying to suppress it, maybe the more useful approach is to ask, okay, what is this specific fear about? What past echo is it bringing up? What is it asking me to look at?
Exactly. It shakes the inquiry from why am I afraid to what is this fear revealing about my inner landscape, my history, my needs. It becomes less about a pathology and more about self-awareness.
Right. And understanding that requires zooming out a bit, doesn't it? Looking at the whole picture, the whole field of our awareness.
Yes, the concept of the field is crucial. Imagine you're in a room filled with various objects. Your attention might focus on one specific thing, say, a painting on the wall. That painting becomes the figure.
And everything else, the furniture, the window, the sounds from outside, that's the ground.
Precisely. It's the context within which the figure emerges. In relationships, the other person, the potential for connection, often becomes the figure. But the ground is composed of everything else in our awareness at that moment, our memories, our current mood, our expectations, our deeper fears and hopes.
And that relationship, figure and ground, it's not fixed, is it? It can shift really quickly.
It's incredibly dynamic. That warm, inviting glow of potential closeness, the figure can suddenly feel like a harsh, exposing spotlight if certain elements in the ground, say, a past trauma or a deep insecurity get activated. The perception changes in an instant.
And those unfinished gestalts you mentioned, those unresolved bits from the past, they seem to have a real weight in that ground, don't they? Like they're always there waiting to influence the present figure.
They absolutely do. They carry an energy, a drive towards completion. Think of a simple example. Maybe a childhood misunderstanding with a parent that was never really talked through, or a past betrayal by a friend that still stings.
Okay.
These incomplete experiences linger, and we might completely unconsciously try to finish that old business in our current relationships.
So
We project the dynamics of the past onto the present figure, the person in front of us, which inevitably distorts the reality of the current interaction.
wow. So our attention can get kind of hijacked by the past. We might focus only on cues that seem to confirm our old fears, like we're looking for evidence that says, see, it's happening again.
That selective attention is a key part of it, and this leads to something we sometimes call isomorphism in perception.
Isomorphism. Okay, what's that?
It basically means there's a mirroring, a structural similarity between our internal state, our thoughts, feelings, unresolved issues, and how we perceive the external world, including other people.
So what I'm feeling inside colors how I see things outside.
Exactly. If deep down you're bracing for rejection, you might interpret a perfectly neutral comment or gesture as criticism. If you carry unresolved guilt, you might assume others are constantly judging you harshly.
And that creates a feedback loop, right? You expect rejection, you interpret something negatively, you react defensively, and maybe you do push the person away, confirming your original fear.
Precisely. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, reinforcing the very patterns we dread.
It's kind of a paradox then. We often think of wholeness as everything being smooth and perfect, no rough edges. But maybe true wholeness isn't about erasing the fragments, but about embracing them, accepting the complexity.
I think that's a much more realistic and, frankly, more helpful way to view it. Think of a beautiful mosaic artwork.
Okay, lots of little pieces.
Right. Up close, the individual tiles might seem mismatched, maybe even flawed or broken. They don't fit perfectly. But when you step back and take in the whole image...
You see how they all work together to create something coherent, something beautiful.
Exactly. Each piece contributes to the larger picture. Intimacy can be like that. It's the coming together of different experiences, vulnerabilities, strengths, imperfections. And when we can hold all of that, embrace it, something rich and meaningful emerges.
In that moment of seeing the whole picture, the aha moment, that's insight.
Yes, insight often arises not from forcing things, but from fully engaging with the present moment, with all its complexity, allowing a new pattern, a new understanding to emerge suddenly. It's a reorganization of the perceptual field.
And this idea of isomorphism, the mirroring, does that also apply between people, in the relationship itself?
Absolutely. It extends to the relational dynamic. When two people genuinely connect, their individual fields of awareness start to overlap. There's an interaction at the boundary.
Okay.
Think of light passing through a prism. The prism doesn't absorb the light, it refracts it, revealing its different colors. Similarly, the differences between people in a relationship, different backgrounds, perspectives, emotional landscapes can actually reveal new facets of each individual to themselves.
So the differences aren't necessarily problems, they can be illuminating.
They can be sources of growth and self-discovery, and the quality of that interaction at the boundary, what we call contact, is crucial. Healthy contact involves an exchange of energy and information that actually enhances individuality, rather than dissolving it into some kind of merger.
So it's not about losing yourself in the other person.
Not at all. True intimacy involves this constant interplay between separateness and togetherness, maintaining your own center while connecting deeply with another.
So coming back to the fear, maybe the core fear isn't actually about closeness itself, or even about the other person. Maybe it's about losing that sense of being a separate self, that feeling of distinct identity.
That's a very profound point. From a Gestalt perspective, we might even say that the deep-seated fear stems from confronting the illusion of absolute separation.
The illusion of separation, meaning we're not as separate as we think.
Meaning that we fundamentally exist within an interconnected field. Think of a spiderweb glistening with morning dew. Each droplet seems distinct, separate, right?
Yeah, individual drops.
But they are all intrinsically connected by the intricate, almost invisible threads of the web. Our lives, our consciousness might be similar. We experience ourselves as separate entities, but we are deeply interconnected in ways we often fail to recognize.
So resisting closeness might actually be a resistance to acknowledging that interconnectedness. A resistance to letting go of those rigid ego boundaries and facing the limits of our perceived autonomy.
It could be seen that way. A resistance to the dissolution of the familiar self, even if that dissolution could lead to a more expanded sense of being.
Okay, so pulling it together, this fear, this hesitation we feel, it's this complex brew of our perceptual habits, how we make figures stand out from the ground, mixed with the echoes of our past, our unfinished business.
And our fundamental ways of navigating the world, including that deep-seated tension between wanting connection and fearing the loss of self or control it seems to represent.
But the twist is, that very connection, the thing we might fear, is also the place where we get the clearest reflections of ourselves.
Often, yes. Authentic connection doesn't erase us, it amplifies our self-awareness. Others act as mirrors, showing us parts of ourselves we might otherwise miss.
And integrating those reflections, the good and the maybe uncomfortable ones, that's what leads to a greater sense of wholeness, not as a separate unit, but as part of that larger web.
Exactly. It's about becoming more fully ourselves through our connection with the whole.
So that apprehension, that fear right at the edge, maybe we shouldn't see it just as a stop sign. Maybe it's more like a doorway, an invitation.
I love that reframe, a doorway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a concept called creative indifference. It sounds a bit strange, but it refers to that point of dynamic balance between opposing forces like fear and desire, closeness and distance. It's in that charged space, that transformation becomes possible.
So the tension itself creates the potential for change.
Precisely. That fear you feel at the threshold of intimacy might be a pertinent signal that you're approaching a boundary, not just with another person, but within your own consciousness, an opportunity for significant growth.
Maybe the thing we're actually afraid of isn't the connection itself, but the expanded, more aware version of ourselves we might have to become through that connection.
That's a powerful thought. The fear might be of the unknown self that awaits on the other side of that threshold.
And that mirror idea, the other person reflecting us back, that sounds crucial, but also potentially tricky.
It absolutely is. That mirroring reveals not just how others see us, but the very shape and limits of our own awareness. But our contact boundaries, as we call them, the psychological interface between self and other, can get distorted.
How so?
Well, they can become too rigid, leading to isolation and an inability to connect deeply. Or they can become too permeable, too leaky, leading to a feeling of being overwhelmed, enmeshed, or losing one's sense of self. We call these contact boundary disturbances.
So finding that right balance, that healthy contact, is a constant negotiation.
It's an ongoing process, yes. And the struggle itself, learning to navigate those boundaries, is a necessary part of developing greater self-awareness and healthier relationships.
And we keep circling back to control, don't we? This idea that trying to manage intimacy to keep it predictable and safe might actually stifle it.
It often does. Think of trying to grasp a wave in the ocean.
Impossible. Slips right through your fingers.
Exactly. The more you try to hold on to it, the more elusive it becomes. True intimacy often requires a degree of surrender, of letting go of the need to control the outcome.
And that connects to what you called phenomenological awareness.
Yes, it's about learning to simply observe our experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations as it unfolds, without immediately judging it, analyzing it, or trying to fix it, just noticing.
Letting things be as they are.
And allowing insights to emerge naturally from that clear seeing. When we approach fear with that kind of awareness, it ceases to be an enemy to vanquish and becomes more like a guide, offering valuable information.
Taking an even wider perspective now, if we're all interconnected, like those dewdrops on the web, does that mean our individual struggles with connection are part of something bigger?
I believe so. Every connection, every attempt, every fear, every moment of intimacy contributes to the collective field of awareness, the universal consciousness, if you like. Our personal dramas are threads in a much larger, intricate tapestry.
That's quite a thought. It kind of links the personal psychological stuff to bigger, maybe even existential ideas.
You could certainly draw those parallels. Embracing all of our experience, including the fear and vulnerability around connection, speaks to existential authenticity. And choosing to engage, despite the fear, is an act of existential freedom and courage. Fear becomes not just a psychological artifact, but part of the human condition we choose how to meet.
So maybe the goal isn't to finally arrive in a place where we can swing the door wide open to intimacy without any hesitation at all.
Perhaps not. Perhaps perfection isn't the point.
Maybe it's more about being willing to just leave the door a little bit ajar, to acknowledge the fear but stay open to the possibility.
That's a beautiful metaphor, leaving the door ajar. It speaks to the ongoing nature of this exploration. Life, relationships, our own becoming, they are essentially unfinished gestalts, always unfolding.
So the beauty isn't in finding the final perfect resolution,
but perhaps in the process itself. In the continuous unfolding, the dynamic dance between reaching out and pulling back, the endless potential that lies within human connection, even amidst the fear. Fear and longing, distance and closeness, they aren't really opposites, are they? More like partners in the eternal choreography of being human.
Wow. So this whole deep dive really highlights how that fear of getting close isn't simple at all. It's this incredibly complex mix of how we perceive things, our personal history bubbling up, and these fundamental human tensions. But I think the most hopeful part is reframing that fear. Seeing it not just as a problem, but as, well, as that doorway you mentioned, an invitation to understand ourselves more deeply.
Absolutely. It holds immense potential for growth and self-awareness if we're willing to approach it with curiosity rather than judgment.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. The next time you feel that hesitation, that pause, right at the threshold of connection, what will you choose to notice?
Yes. What might that specific feeling in that specific moment be revealing about the next step in your own unique unfolding journey? It's an exploration that's always available.